Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. It is a day in Buffalo where everybody, it's like impending doom. Everybody is emptying out the supermarkets because, oh my God, we're going to get snow tonight. Geez. Okay. And usually, as we know, weather forecasters, the meteorologists on the local TV, it's like snowpocalypse, and then it ends up being 3 inches. But
the other day I didn't hear anything about anything, and then we woke up to a snow squall. So,
but that's the way it
happens. That happens too.
That's the way it happens, Russ. It doesn't for all these satellites and all the everything else. When we get a storm, it's the storm that nobody predicts. It's like, okay, all of a sudden you got 40-mile-an-hour winds and the snow's blowing all over the place, and you didn't get any. But every time they say, "Oh my God, it's a winter storm warning," it never lives up to the expectations. But anyway,
don't you think that you pay a price for the lake effect there, where those are harder to predict, aren't they?
But in general, and that people around Buffalo know this, the places that get hit are south of the city. That's the snow. That's what they call the snow belt.
Yeah,
where like Orchard Park is, where the Bills stadium is. They get destroyed, and anybody who lives there, you're insane. You basically have to have a Humvee or a Jeep or something like that, because if you don't have that one, the snow, and they get the snow regularly. Like where I live near the Buffalo airport, you get hit every once in a while, but not badly.
Well, what I find so curious about it is, and we've talked about this before, but when I used to drive to Buffalo, even though it's shorter to go through Canada, I don't do that because you got to cross the border twice. I never know what I'm going to get. Right. And I'd rather drive the extra 35 minutes around the long way, or 40 minutes, and then not have to deal with the border crossings.
Sure.
But in order to do that, I got to go through the lake effect of the snow. Yes. And it always just cracks me up that the minute you see the sign that says lake effect warnings, immediately the weather just gets bad. like every time I'm driving, I swear, I've never been drive during July.
I had it happen once. When I was working in business, they sent me to Buffalo for like a day trip on a flight, and it was to go visit Inger Marisol, the big book producer, and also they sell a lot of other stuff. And the same thing happened. I'm in the car, and snow's already piled up to the hilt, and just out of nowhere, it's like blizzarding. Luckily, it dissipated that day, and I got home that night. But just passing through Buffalo anytime is a problem.
So if tomorrow it's like this, like I'm talking, and the snow's up to here, then we got hit with the blizzard.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, people talk about Buffalo and the snow, but it's real. Like there, a lot of people, like in Michigan, we have snow, but not like Buffalo. Like I remember when I was there for God rest his soul, Jim Kelly's funeral. Like, my God, the snow was like 5 feet high on the roads. Like, I remember walking down the road to get to my car, and I'm thinking, geez, I hope another car doesn't come down here. Because first of all, you can't see down, over the snow drift, so you don't know what's going on over there.
Well, these are hardy people, Mike.
Yeah, they are hard.
The famous blizzard was the blizzard of 77, and in that one we only got a foot of snow, but we had 50-mile-an-hour winds, and it whipped it into basically like 10-foot snow drifts, and that's why it debilitated the entire city. They had to call in the National Guard and the.
Well, all right. So only because you mentioned that, Mike, and my brother went to UB, I'm going to preempt and give one little note before the pre-show and say that snowstorm was on General Hospital, and they had this whole sequence called the Ice Princess. And yesterday they just killed off Luke Spencer, who was their longest running.
After 40 years, they killed him off?
Yeah, 40-something years they killed him off. He hadn't been on the show in like 5 years, but I'm only mentioning it because you mentioned the 77 blizzard, and they used all of that footage in General Hospital for the whole sequence of this whole season.
I hope
why did they kill him off? Do you know?
They just because they won't say, but my guess is he probably didn't want to come back.
The last severance check to Anthony Gary probably cleared.
Yeah. I was going to say, I hope they didn't kill off Jeannie Francis because
she's still there. Now
she is beautiful.
here's the pre-show. So the pre-show is Novak Djokovic.
Oh,
He is
geez.
supposed to go play in the Australian Open. And he claimed he had medical exemption, so he was going to just fly into Australia and have no problem with the vaccination exemption or anything else. The premier had other ideas and said, you're going to have to prove this exemption, or otherwise you're not getting in. We don't care who you are. And I just saw an update, and right now he's delayed because he made a mistake with his visa. So if you're expecting to see Novak Djokovic play in the Australian Open, I wouldn't be expecting it.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, that's a loss. You know, I know that I set my clock to every match at the Australian Open.
Listen, there are people that do. Djokovic's a big name.
Yeah, my wife's a tennis fan. Yeah. Well, that'll give me your little, why you would even care whether people like tennis thing. Well, give me my lead in for my Wes McCauley. So
okay, good, great. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World.
Great,
Today,
Boston.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022.
I'm just going from Sportsology. That was Anthony Mingione. Maybe he'll be back. Who knows?
Great. I've got a signal, so I'm very happy. And Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
I'm Anthony Mingione. And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, Kev, you were.
Well, I was just going to bring up, if you were watching last night's Red Wing game, Wes McCauley was doing. He's done this before, but for some reason, this is the night. A lot of people put it on social media when McCauley calls fighting majors. He's got a little routine now down. He's a colorful referee. He's a quality referee too. He's one of the best in the game. Highly respected. He's been mic'd up before, and it's always very entertaining because he has such great rapport. But what I'm surprised about is, I would say about 30% of the people who commented don't like it. They say it's too showy and that, the players are the game, not him. And what's a referee doing that kind of stuff. And my attitude about all that is, and not everyone's over the top about it. They just say, I don't like it. But why do you care? If it's not if you don't think it's a cool thing, then what, you just ignore it. Isn't that what we do in life all the time? I don't understand the people that think it's such a big deal. Am I missing something here? What's the?
I mean,
I would just ignore it.
I mean, normally I'm the one who gets bothered by anything. But in this instance, if you remember back in I can't remember what NFL referee, when one player is you gave him 15 yards for giving him the business.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
and
I thought it was hilarious.
Right, I thought it was great. It's the only thing that I can think of is that some people think it's all about Wes McCauley when he does that, but I wouldn't mind it if
I've never thought that.
Yeah, I don't think it either. I know Wes a little bit. I knew his dad too, John McCauley, just a fine human being. But here's the thing I did want to bring up about that, which maybe not everyone is caught on about this, but the NHL put that out on their Twitter feed. So what that says is the NHL thinks it's fine. And that is really a departure from what we used to see. If you remember, the referees that had a little showmanship, they got a little warning. Used to get warnings from the league about, you aren't the, it even came down to when they put their names on the uniforms and, that kind of thing. And then people said, well, they shouldn't be identified. It should be just they're, part of the scenery and all that kind of stuff. And, if you remember our good friend Paul Stewart.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure he got that note.
Yeah, he was a very demonstrative referee. And some people just didn't like that.
Well, and to that point, Kev, it's because I've been watching hockey since I was 5 years old. I remember Wally Harris, Bob Myers, Andy Van Helleman, Bill McCrill,
sure, yeah.
Carey Fraser, obviously. I mean, they were famous or infamous based on how they called the game, and they all called the game different. And at some point, the NHL just said, "Well, we don't want these guys to be the part of the game. We want them to just be sort of like an automaton, just like a sort of non-human. Just they'll call the play the way it is." I like the way Macaulay is. He's sort of setting sort of an individualism, which is fine. I have no problem with personality. The only problem I ever have with personality is when that's linked with incompetence, and we see that in baseball with guys like Angel Hernandez or some of these umpires who if you talk the wrong way or if you make the wrong gesture, they're going to throw you out of the game because they're God forbid that you upset them or something like that. That I have a problem with. I don't think Macaulay's
I think it's fun to have referees that have some color in their calls. Like, don't you love the basketball referees who yell no, 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 or give you the that when on calls? And I love that. When I grew up with like Ron Luciano, who used to shoot the guys.
Oh yeah.
On first base when you were out. And he would, one point the mics picked him up, said when the guy said he pulled his foot and he said three toes on the bag. I counted them.
But the only thing is, Kev, for every one of the Ron Lucianos and guys like that you like Timothy goes Joe West. Joe West, there's a lot of people that hate Joe West.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of people that hate Joe West. But I wonder too, is some of that is his politics.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and he's it's his way or the highway. It's
part of the cowboy Joe West persona that he had.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Not everybody loves the officials who give it back to the players, but I do. You know what I mean? Like, I was never bothered by the umpire when he was getting screamed at, who turned around and screamed back, even though
because again, you still are a human being.
Right.
At some point, you might react. Like, there's always a button somebody can push with anybody that you've just gone too far, no matter what human being you are.
Now, apparently, Anthony Mangione is calling from the black hole of Calcutta here.
Yeah.
Anthony,
I can hear you guys. It's just my camera is not operating and not working here. So you'll have to deal with my my deep,
Well, you've never looked better. I'll just say that.
And I like the umpires who call a strike like they're going into a windup to throw the pitch.
I like that too.
The
players hate it though.
And then we'll get off of this. But the one thing I can't stand, I cannot remember the umpire. He's infamous, especially with play-by-play broadcasters. This
delayed call.
Yes, he'll say strike 3 and the batter is walking away, and then he'll do the thing. And John Sterling, who's half blind, is he's waiting for the call, and then all of a sudden
I think Eric Gregg used to have a slow strikeout hand too.
It's painful. It's ponderous.
Yeah, that the one that's, I don't know who it is, but the one that's a delay. I mean, it's so long that you think the play is over. I mean, like you don't, and then he calls the strike, and you're going, what?
Yeah.
It's like you're on a 7-second radio delay.
Goalie FP Enrico Palazzo from the Naked Gun. There you go.
There you go.
But ahead. I do love one of the things. This is hockey related, so let's continue this for just a second. See if you guys feel the same way. I've noticed that on the goal call, on the replay, especially after we had been for a while, some of the guys are really demonstrative. They point to the center and turn around and then crowd goes nuts. I love that.
The more they can add to that, the better. Because we're waiting so long, it's like you might as well, might as well make it good.
Well, I like that too.
It's a fun
there's been
Austin Matthews caught crap a couple of years ago when he scored a goal. They waved it off as a no goal, or went to video review and they said no goal. And then 30 seconds later he scored and he pointed toward the goal like the referee did. And everybody thought he was mocking the referee. And I'm like, no, he had a goal that he thought should have counted, got waved off. He was just emphasizing that he scored. I didn't have a problem with it. But anyway, Go ahead.
All right. Okay, are you ready?
We already
did the introductions. Good. Thanks, guys.
That's excellent.
I don't have to worry about the date. I don't have to worry about the fact that 2022. 2022. I don't have to think about any of that. I appreciate that.
I'm waiting for 2023. So
takes a lot of pressure off of me here today. I appreciate that. I could use the pressure off of me right now a little bit. All right. We're gonna talk. I wanted to talk today a little bit about the Central Division because I'm in the process of a couple things here, but before we get there, I do want to get into this rumor that I wrote about today because it is. Some will say not a big story because of what could happen or what should happen or what's likely to happen, but I think it's a possibly huge story. Okay, and just because the person I talked to, if I can't say who it is, but if this person was anybody else, I would have written this off as being like, I doubt it. But I had a source today from Montreal that told me, and I have like two guys in Montreal that I've trusted since the very beginning of this.
Right.
The guy told me that it's 100% sure that Carey Price is in play at the deadline. And I said, what does that mean? What does that mean that Carey Price is in play at the deadline? Because that's a kind of I'm sure Carey Price is in play right now. I'm sure that at this point with Montreal and rebuild that if somebody offered the right package up, Carey Price is in play. I would assume, that they're going to move on from him because he's not going to be part of their eventual picture, right?
I don't think they're going to move on for him next season. I don't.
And he said, well, yeah, and then he went on. And he said 40% moved at the deadline, 80% moved in the offseason. And I said,
yeah,
okay.
Well,
but the 40% of the deadline is a high number.
That's a high number.
It's too high.
That's what I said. And I said that's really high.
Only because of his salary.
His salary is crazy, right?
Yeah. So
and I said, well, what do you mean to tell me we're gonna be sitting here? We're gonna be watching the TSN. We're doing our trade deadline show that we always do. We'll be watching TSN, and then suddenly Carey Price is gonna show up on that board. People are gonna be talking about him on that trade board. And he said, yes, that's gonna happen.
Okay, wow. Well, only if now he's got 4 more years at $10.5 million.
Yeah. Only
if I think Montreal retains a significant chunk that they have a chance of moving. And only if Kevin, I think this is probably a guarantee. Only if they go to Price and say, "Do you want to go?"
Yeah. So the other thing is, and this a reader actually pointed this out to me, and he was right on this. Mm-hmm. You're not only dealing with the Carey family on this, you're probably dealing with his therapist on this. Like, there'll be a discussion about whether at this stage would this be good for him. So I think that will come into play as well. And like I said, a reader brought that up to me, and I think he's absolutely right.
Is there any place worse, Kevin, than rebuilding Montreal for a goalie? I mean,
I agree, but it might be too soon for him to pick up and throw himself into a Stanley Cup run and all that kind of stuff.
Especially if you trade him to a place, and this is not realistic. I'm just saying, especially like say Toronto is interested. Toronto is about as busy a media market as Montreal is. Montreal is probably more psychotic, but
that would blow up the internet like we've never seen.
But what I'm saying,
just imagine that for a second.
If you have a franchise, or say Colorado, for example, if you have a franchise that hasn't won in a while, that has expectations of winning with the group that they have right now, that might be more pressure filled than Montreal rebuild. I mean, there's no pressure in Montreal rebuilding. They're going to stink for a few years.
There's the pressure in Montreal, Mike.
No, I think there's pressure, but I really don't think he's getting dealt at the deadline. And I would be really surprised if he doesn't start the season with them next year, because they still are going to have to sell tickets. They didn't get to see Carey Price this year. And I think Carey Price might even want to, play a few more games as a Canadian before he agrees to a trade too. I think
he will. I think he will play a few more games.
Go ahead.
I don't think Carey Price gets traded unless he tells the Montreal Canadiens that he wants to get traded.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Anthony's right on. I think after this season, they'll have a meeting. Everybody will sit down and they'll say, "What do you want to do?" And if he wants to move on, then they'll get serious and maybe get a third team involved and sit down and try to figure out to send him where he wants. I mean, he's that kind of player. And
he deserves that kind of respect. I agree with that. Yes. But what I'm saying from the person I was talking to, I can't get into much more than this. I got the impression that discussion has already happened. And I'm not saying that,
this is what I would say. I don't think, given the circumstances of where he started the season, that he would be comfortable talking about his long-term future when he's that closely removed from being in rehab.
Yeah.
I just don't think anybody, his wife, his family, the team, would want him to think about those things like now. That's how I would see that.
That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, Kev. It does. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that the impression I got was that, and that, that, listen, I mean, perhaps, and without giving away too much, perhaps, Carey Price is one that has, as part of his recovery, wants to move on, like that he sees this as part of his discussion, that he sees part of that, when he comes out there, he's like, you know what, guys, I appreciate it. This situation was going on last year when he was in the play. Like, he was not in great shape last year going in the playoffs, but yet he still performed unbelievably, right? Like, he was remarkable last year in the playoffs, despite the fact that he was going through all this stuff was happening. This stuff didn't start happening after the playoffs. So the reality is, maybe he comes through but if you come through the therapy and you look at all the things you have to change in your life when you're in therapy, you come out of there and you say, one of the things I have to change is my location. Like, I have to change.
Well, yeah. Let me ask you this, just to because you were kind of circling around it. Let me draw it out of you. So, are you saying that maybe they've already reached the conclusion that part of his problem is the environment of Montreal is tough for him to handle, and he needs to get out of there? Is that what we're saying?
I'm almost saying that. I'm not. What I'm going to say it a better way without getting.
I mean, it's an interesting thought.
I'm going to say it this way. A person can come out of therapy and realize the changes that need to be made, and also, and when you're a competitive person like him, want to make those changes as soon as possible.
Yeah, but let's put it in terms that we all understand. Yeah. We all know people who've gone to rehab, and think back to people. Do you know anybody that got out of rehab and then within 3 months picked it up and moved their lives and went elsewhere? Or did it take a while to sort that all out? I would say the answer is the latter in that form.
It does. I mean, I've had two cousins who've gone through rehab, and one went through rehab and his problem was his job. Like, that was part of his job. It wasn't necessarily his job. It was more like, but the influences of people at his job were a part of his drug issue, right? So,
but here's the problem when it comes to the other side of the equation. Okay, Carey Price wants out of Montreal, or Montreal wants to move on from him because he's got 4 years left and a big salary. Right now, where he is and what's going on in his life, this is a big roll of the dice for some team who is interested in acquiring him. Do you know that you're getting the Carey Price that's worth $10.5 million or even close to that?
There is no question, Mike, that you're right about that.
That's why I think he needs to play again.
I think you will see him play again before this happens.
Yes.
I think you'll see him, and that's implying that if he's going to go at the deadline, that if he's in play at the deadline, he plays before the deadline. Like, that's, in my mind, he plays.
There's too much money riding in the future on him.
Yeah, and you're not going to take that. And you're right. I mean, I have every reason to be concerned about that. That chance. Price has always carried the weight of the Montreal Canadiens. Like a 10-ton thing on his shoulders. Like, he has always felt that. There's no question about that. And the Canadiens have never been the dominant team.
Thank you.
In front of Price, where he could just be the goalie, who was the guy who's going to keep. He's never been in a situation like Marc-Andre Fleury was, say, in Vegas. Where he's got a great team in front of him. He's never had that ever.
He's always had to be Superman, and that's
always had to be Superman. That has taken a toll, and he is a guy from, as you guys know, British Columbia. He's not he's a Western Canadian guy. He's not. Western Canadian guys in general are a little more laid back. This is not a laid back spot for Price to be in. Price is a laid back guy. He's handled it incredibly well for many, many years, and obviously got to him, or life got to him. Listen, whatever Price wants to do, he should be allowed to do. I will say that flat out. Like, if he doesn't want to go anywhere else, if he says, I got to stay in Montreal and rebuild my career here, he should be allowed to do that. And I think Montreal will allow him to do that.
No.
But I do think there's two elements to it. Yeah, a team is going to want to see him play, but that won't answer the real question about whether or not he's far enough along in his recovery to deal with that. And I don't think you're going to be able to answer that without a few more months under his belt. That's why I think it would make more sense. And even the summer is still early. When you consider when he started all this, but at least you have more of a history. where not only for the team that would be interested, but for himself to know, where he is. And, your cousins, I don't know whether or not, quitting your job is one thing, but, did they move clear across the country and pack up and go to a completely different environment where you don't have support? Like right now, I'm guessing, I don't really know, but I'm sure he's got a pretty strong support group set up.
He had a really strong wife, obviously, a really strong family. His immediate family is incredibly strong. I don't know much about his family from British Columbia or what have you. But I don't know much about that at all. But
I would say, even though I think that he's going to be reluctant to, get moved this spring. I mean, I think he's coming back and he's going to be a goalie in the National Hockey League. And I think he'll be a good goalie.
I do too, and I really look forward to that time because he's one of my favorite people. I mean, I've met him a couple times, talked to him. He's a great guy, and I think he's a great goalie, and he's done great things. And the Montreal Canadian fans will always love Carey Price. There is no question. No matter what decision he makes here, they will love him. Will they hang his number from the banner, from the rafters? Who knows? It's Montreal, right? But at the same time, that's a big question for a later day, right?
It will be one thing if he was a free agent and a team takes a 1-year chance on him. I mean, then you'd have people lining up. It's another thing that he has 4 years left and making the kind of money that he's making. But
he is also Carey Price, Mike. And
I get it.
That's where that contract is that contract. But if you could financially make it work, and he's like, you know what, I would like to go play with Connor McDavid, or I would like to go play with Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin, and and those teams know that he wants to go there.
Yeah, right now the problem is the teams that need goalies are really tight against the cap, and not just tight as in it would be hard to squeeze a $3 million player in the Edmonton cap, and it would be in Colorado. They're not much better. I don't know offhand exactly what they are. Maybe Mike could look that up. But
in terms of under,
but I know they don't have a lot.
I have to believe Price would at least give him a list, because if Price were to say, I want to go to Edmonton, it's a pretty limited amount of guys that you could get from them that are really going to help the Canadians. They're almost guaranteed to lose in that deal.
They only if we're discussing pressure cooker environments, Edmonton is going to be just as much because of the expectations on the goaltending and how much of a microscope Mike Smith and Koskinen have faced this year. I don't know if that's a concern for if we're talking about Montreal, the environment itself being difficult. Edmonton is not going to be a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, ask Mikko Koskinen in the interview that he gave to a Finnish reporter that we know about how he's dealing with the pressure in Edmonton right now.
You can say Tommy Sepala. It's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, but what's interesting, I mean, I'm sure we have more to say about Carey Price. We can move back to him, but this is a good place to jump onto this, because I thought Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts column, where he brought up the debate over it makes any sense whatsoever for the Edmonton Oilers, an imperfect team, to go out and buy rental players and give up future assets. And I had this discussion with my friend Tom Laidlaw, former NHL player who I do a podcast with, and we were on complete opposite sides. He thinks it makes no sense, because he said, what's their chances, even if they acquire a goalie and a defenseman, of making it? And I said, doesn't matter. They got a seat at the table. You get in it, you got a chance to win.
I get where Tom's coming from, but you're right, Kev. They are going to make trades.
I'm on your side.
The question is are they going to make trades?
I think they're going to try.
It's really kind of simple. Like, first of all, Edmonton, the first-round draft picks, second-round draft picks, they're not selling that to their fan base anymore. Like, that's just not going to – that doesn't mean anything to them, right? And their fan base, I mean, knowing their fan base very well, like we all do, especially on hockey, they're not selling their fan base. But not only that, you are looking at a place with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and Nurse, and you have some guys there that players are willing to sign to play with. So you're a free agent. As a free agent, Hunt, if you have money, you can get people, I think, to come.
But they don't have money, and this is the
now.
Their audience. See, their audience that they have to please right now. The fans is secondary. The audience they have to please are wearing number 97 and wearing number 29.
Right, they don't right now, but they do have
off right now, Eck. They're
I
pissed
know,
off.
but that's obvious. And listen, between the Sabres fans and Oilers fans, and now a little bit Islanders fans, you've got some angry people. But the reality is, that Oilers fans are not going to sit there and say, okay, they're not going to be thrilled about getting the first pick overall. It's not going to do anything. And even though the first pick could be amazing, at what point does that do anything for them? They have to make an impact.
How many more years can you sell Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and say, say for example, disaster scenario this year, they missed the playoffs. Okay. How many more years can you say to these guys with term left in those big deals? You say, well, we're going to do it right this year. Okay. You thought we did it. We're doing it right the last 3 years, and we're 3 years older and we're no closer to winning a Stanley Cup than we were 3 years ago.
Well, yeah.
It was.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kevin. No, the same could have been said about the Toronto situation, but they did find a way to get through it. They mucked their way through it, and there were many years in Toronto where you could say the same thing.
Yeah, but it's spectacular because for this reason, Toronto didn't break up any kind of team to rebuild. It was real simple to just strip it down to the chassis.
Right.
And in Edmonton, you have the number one offensive player in the game, and maybe number two, maybe three, depending on how you feel about it. But anyway, two of the top three offensive players in the game. And I made the case last year that I felt like the crime in Anaheim is that they were wasting an incredible good goaltender in John Gibson because they wouldn't go out and fix their offense. They were last for 3 consecutive years, or last or second to last. And in Edmonton, they're wasting 2 incredibly gifted offensive players by not giving them any kind of team that gives them any kind of shot. So I would say that you've got to try to make an effort. But, I'm hearing from talking to other general managers that, everybody is playing this game where they're trying to figure out, what Holland's going to do. And it's a tough one. Like, you look at that, it's not easy to come up with a scenario that allows them to get both a defenseman and a goalie.
Well, and Kevin, I want to bring
what Holland has to do is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, and Kevin, we heard the name pop up yesterday after they lose to the Rangers at MSG on Monday, and over the last week, the name Mike Babcock has popped up.
Yeah, but he is Holland has
shot that down.
Yeah. He's also kind of told people privately, look at my history. I don't make mid-season coaching change.
Ken, we got this guy. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Ken, his name is Babcock. I don't know if you know him or not. I mean, it's like,
but they need to do something because they were a much better team earlier in the season, and so there's issues. And I've talked about in the past about teams waiting for something to happen. I watched them the other night. They strike me as that team. They're waiting to see what somebody's going to do. But you were going to give us maybe a scenario, Eck, that you thought maybe could clear up some space.
Yeah, and I think Holland has to go out of his comfort zone here, which is something that he doesn't very often do. I don't think, but and that is, player that has to go is Nugent Hopkins, which is a really tough spot because he makes the money, he's got value,
he's got a no move clause, and they just
got a no move clause. But for Nugent Hopkins, I don't think the no move clause is as vital. There are his situation in Edmonton is he's never going to be the guy in Edmonton, right? He's always going to be behind the other two. So
I don't think he wants to be the guy.
Well, maybe he doesn't, but I'm actually a huge fan of Nugent Hopkins. Like, I think he's underrated. I think that, and this year he's shown moments of greatness, moments of not so much.
He's underrated for some things, Zach, but for what they were hoping to get out of him, he's not underrated. He's not really come through the way if he came through to the degree of something close to McDavid or Draisaitl, we wouldn't have half of these discussions.
He did. He took. Okay.
He's not that player, right? He's a two-way player, and he's very different.
That's what we know now. We didn't know that then.
You didn't know that. As far as two-way players go, he's pretty damn solid. Like, he's like a guy that, man, if he was on the Maple Leafs, for example, or something like that, he would be a majorly important player for them.
Yeah, but they needed him to be a big-time building block, and he's sort of a core player, but not a big-time building block.
Right.
The problem is that
he makes a lot of money.
Yes.
Yeah, well, not really. That's the thing. He took an 8-year deal and spread the AAV out. He's making 5.1.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
I thought it was even more. Okay.
Yeah. That's the point I was going to bring up.
That's
$5 million isn't going to help as much as you think it is.
And obviously, the other scenario we talked about has to be moving Koskinen and a first or second round draft pick out of there together to a team
he's
like
a rental.
Arizona.
He's a rental now, so you probably get away with that for a second round pick. But no, the problem is that you're spending nine and a quarter on Darnell Nurse starting next year, and I love Darnell Nurse. I think he's a really good defenseman. He's not a $9.25 million defenseman. Duncan Keith is practically done, and you're paying him $5.5 million. You spent $3.25 on Cody Ceci, who was turned into Cody Ceci.
Okay, look, I think it's legit if you want to say the way Holland spent that $13 million wasn't the best.
Right.
But again, Edmonton wasn't in a real great position to get everything they needed either. So
I think by the end of that Nurse contract, it's going to be fine. I think that's one of those contracts that even though it's 9.3 now, yeah, it's a lot, but by the end of it.
And I'll say it again. And the one thing more important than getting Zach Hyman, and like I said, I love Zach Hyman. He's a great player. But more important than getting Zach Hyman was getting a goaltender. And Ken Holland struck out twice.
But he knew he wasn't getting a goalie, so he figured he'd upgrade the offense because secondary scoring was a problem too. Like
everybody I talked to say he did try to get a goalie. Like he's not
like Grubauer. He tried to get Grubauer.
So. I mean,
they've also lost, I think, and we'll add this to the mix as well with Edmonton, and you could, whether or not you believe this to be, I think they lost two pretty solid defensemen.
Yes.
This offseason when they traded Ethan Bear and when they, of course, lost Adam Larson. For as much as everybody likes to make fun of that trade, I think Larson was a solid secondary guy that I think could cover for some of the defensive inadequacies that we've seen on the Oilers. They've lost defensive depth, and the replacements have not been good enough. And then you add the questionable goaltending to the mix. I mean, Zach Hyman is a good two-way player, but he's not going to cover for all of your ills.
Right. And I mean, like I said, when you have the dike with multiple leaks, you don't have enough fingers to plug them up. The least important of them was that secondary winger to play with McDavid or Draisaitl. I mean, like I said, Zach Hyman's great, but you needed to plug up the defense. You needed to plug up the massive hole in goal. And if you couldn't get Markstrom or you couldn't get Grubauer, then you had to go out and overpay to get Kemper or get one of the goaltenders who were on the market. And that's
here's my thinking, like with this thing now, like, and we got to move on from Edmonton because we talk about him too much on the show. Well, but Hudobin is out there, right? And I don't get not giving it a shot. Like I really don't. I mean, he's shown in playoffs recently his ability to step up in big games. He's better than anything they have.
That would be the prototypical Edmonton move to trade for a goaltender who you don't know.
When was the last time they did that, Mike? Like,
it's iffy, and they have to make a lot of adjustments just to fit in his salary for an iffy guy. I wouldn't do it.
And he's got term left. Is the whole point.
Yeah, but I think Dallas would eat some of that salary. I think. I mean, they're really desperate to get rid of one of those goalies.
Yeah, they probably eat some of it, but it's still a lot.
But before we go to the Central Division, I wanted to bring this up because I saw this tweet, and the talk about the Olympics right now, and obviously it's getting, Canada and the U.S. are going to get players wherever they can. Mike Trakos, who covers the Leafs in the NHL for the Sun Media Group, he reported that Eric Stahl, who played last year with Montreal, his agent had been contacted, and there'd been mutual interest regarding Stahl playing for Team Canada. Obviously, he played for Team Canada, I think in 2010, in Vancouver.
Yeah, he did.
Now, another name that has been mentioned previously was Patrick Marleau, who was playing with San Jose last year. I don't think he wanted to retire, and I don't think he ever announced his retirement. So he's still in hockey shape, and he also played for Team Canada before. But a list came out from our good friend Scott Wheeler, and this is the problem I have. Okay, he lists Jack Quinn, who's the Buffalo Sabres first round pick. He's signed. He's on an NHL deal. He can't play. Michael Del Zotto, he's on an NHL contract with Ottawa. He can't play. The rest of the names, the names that at the end of the list that make me laugh, I'm sure Canada wants to be represented by Brendan Leipsic and Jake Virtanen. Because
to me, that was crazy. Like, that's like, if they do that, boy, will they get excoriated.
I mean, are you really kidding?
I mean, isn't Jake Virtanen better than some of the players they're going to be?
No, it's not better, Ek. It's the fact that Virtanen and Leipsic are playing in the KHL because they did things that were so reprehensible that no NHL team would give them the light of day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go on that moral clause, for sure, I agree with you.
I mean, if you want them to represent your country,
all right. The way I would put it is this: it is the Olympics. If at any time you're going to kind of go with that moral thing, it would be the Olympics,
right?
I don't disagree with you. I'm playing a little devil's advocate here.
Again, they refer to this as being a quote long list. I want to know where the spacing was between where the guys are considering in Leipzig and Virtanen. Like, is this? This. That's what I'm curious.
Yeah,
about.
The long list. That list must extend to the Straits of Magellan, there, Anthony. Because I mean, my goodness. But you know, I mean, a guy like Josh Hosang, who's on an AHL contract. Okay, giving that guy an opportunity who has a lot of talent. Okay, if Canada goes that way, that's fine. We heard about Owen Power possibly going. You know, the question I have, Kev, is how many? Because we talked about this before. How many of these college players, like how many, is Michigan going to allow to go to Beijing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for that, but like I said, I have been told that there will be college players. So I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't know how they feel about it, and they'll be back in time for the games that really matter.
Right. If they don't test positive, knock on wood.
And it's hard not to go, for a guy like Owen Powers, like to not do that. If you're asked to do it, I mean, it's a tough thing to say no to. Honestly, it's like
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is tough to say no. Although if you're Michigan and if you're looking at it just from a selfish perspective, I mean, you only have this kid for 2 seasons because he's going to the Buffalo Sabres, and now he's going to traipse off in the middle of your season, and play for Team USA. But I agree with you. I think for the most part, you want to be helpful. This is supposed to be a college program, not a pro.
Probably Michigan probably said, look, you could take one of our kids. You could have
it's not like taking one of them is going to keep them out of the tournament, Russ, right? Like not one. They're still going to be there at the end. Michigan. I mean,
they'll still be there, but the idea is they had another kid who, Ken Johnson could easily play for Team Canada too, but I don't think Michigan would want 2 of them to go. So they probably said take one.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I don't know either. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know what how the teams kind of feel about it. I guess the coaches feel differently than.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it's how little we know about this right now, isn't it? I mean, like how little we have any idea who's going.
Yeah, but I think it really the interest level sort of just fell off the floor, fell off the table as soon as the NHL players weren't going.
But I agree, and when I think about the last time the NHLers went to the Olympics, I didn't know any of those guys before the Olympics even started. Like I most people wouldn't know any of those players. You just turned it on. This is the guys playing for USA, and there was Eric O'Dell playing. I knew that. That was fun. He was playing for Team Canada.
He dropped all his responsibilities of running Hockey Buzz.
He did. He was suddenly playing for Team Canada. That was pretty cool.
They, him now because Troy Terry was one of the key players.
Right.
And Donato. So
was it Adam Foster too?
That's the Troy Terry story. Last night he got a hat trick that gives him 21 goals. I looked it up this morning to see if I was
Jordan Greenway is the other one. I was trying to think Jordan Greenway we knew was playing too.
Yeah. I mean, he was a top pick, but so in his first 130 games in the NHL, Troy Terry had 15 goals, and now of course he has 21 goals just in this. Shortened season. So my question in all this now, is it possible? Because we don't normally see, I know Russ disagrees on this, but I've looked it up and it doesn't happen all that often where guys arrive at 24 and they have their, first, decent season. So I wonder if it's in Terry's case, Like that Anaheim offense was so poor for 3 seasons. I mean, they weren't just bad. Like they were near the bottom of the league. Like we can't score goals. Could he just not have been able to do what he does because there wasn't enough ability? And now this season, there's an improved team. You know, he got expanded ice time, and now he can do what he can do.
I saw something last night, Kev. Really watching him because I wanted to see if there was a difference in him because I had seen him play internationally. I'd seen him play a lot. And I kind of had him pegged for like a third line or two, like a good one, 17, 20 goals a year, maybe max. His two-step quickness is way better than it was a year or two ago. The play he made last night that turned Sanheim around off the wall when Drysdale gave him a pass, that is a play I don't think he could have made in the NHL even a year ago. But the speed burst that he put on really was impressive. And I didn't have him pegged for that kind of speed.
And just remember, there was talk in the offseason about him like wanting out or them wanting to get him out of Anaheim. So I'm it's just a theory, and I have no idea whether there's any validity to it. But I'm sticking with my theory. I'm going to pretend I'm Russ Cohen.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
growth curve.
Actually under the central division.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hold on to that like grim death.
We got time.
I'm not sure if we have time, but we can try to do this. So I wanted to look at the Central Division here, and I've been doing this thing on Hockey Buzz called Pretender, Contender, Surrender, or Mindbender. And obviously, contender and pretender we all know what that means, right? A team's a contender, a team's a pretender. Surrender means that they probably should be giving up or haven't given up, or that's like the Michael Jello thing. A surrender, total surrender. Then there's the mind bender is like, I have no friggin' idea what this team. So when I was going through this, this list of, I did it in the Metro Division, and today I want to do it with you guys in the Central, because the Central Division is crazy. Like the Central Division is really all over the map, and I mean, so for example, what I've been doing is I say I believe this team is something, but I'm afraid they might be this, and they'll start with like the St. Louis Blues, for example, number 1 team right now in the Central Division. I believe they are contenders because of obviously they were in the Stanley Cup recently, so I believe they're contenders. But I'm afraid they're mind benders and that they could still fall off the rails and go either way. So that's kind of where I would end with the Blues.
Well, they are right now they're contenders, but I think they might be pretenders because I am not convinced that they can be as good as they were 3 years ago without Alex Pietrangelo on defense. I don't think their defense is good enough, and Binnington's an excellent goaltender and he won a cup, but can Binnington step it up at a higher level to make up for the fact that they don't have a guy who plays 25 minutes a night like Pietrangelo did?
I'm going to say I think St. Louis is still a contender. I disagreed with what Bissonnette said the other day, like, hey, let's get a bigger guy and replace Perinovich. I think you give Perinovich that time, you'd be shocked at how good he could be on puck retrieval, how fast he is, how good he is on the rush. He's a good defender. I wouldn't replace him at all. I would actually start counting on him more later in the season.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Kev?
Oh, well, I think they're a contender for sure, and I think they're going to stay that way. I mean, I just heard in the last 24 hours that, they're looking real hard at Sherratt, and it'll be a different kind of defense than they had when they had Pietrangelo. But, he can be a playoff-style defenseman, as we saw last season. So if they're going to boldly go out, and we do know that Armstrong can be bold as a general manager, if they could go out and do that, I think they could be a very serious contender. And
that's a good ad for them. A guy who's been in that division for a long time when he was with Winnipeg, solid, defensively tough. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if I had to pick another one, if you'd force me to, I would probably say a mind bender, just because they're a little bit difficult to read, because I think Mike's right on. When you take a Pietrangelo out of that team, you're left with a defense that isn't quite sure exactly what it is. Bringing Krug's a good player, but he's not a guy that kind of alters your look. That's how I saw that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, what do you think, Anthony?
I mean, I'm definitely in the contender camp, and the way I look at it is this is sort of the kind of the test of Craig Berube in this circumstance. He was able to lean on when you had Pietrangelo, you're able to kind of lean on that bellwether. And now they're restructured. And this is maybe a little bit closer to maybe the team that he obviously had a great team couple of years back, but if that team can play, if they can divvy out and handle roles, I think in a certain way. Now I do agree. I think they need either one of their own to step up into more minute role, as Russ indicated with Perenovich, or going out for a guy like Sherratt to more evenly distribute the ice time. But I think Sherratt also, because he's a top 4 defenseman, you can lean on you can give him 20 more minutes and distribute the ice time accordingly, obviously before we get to injury. So, and again, I do need to see where Binnington is at. He has his, he's had great moments, but he's also had moments where he's been out to lunch at times. So, I do need to see, closer to what I saw a few years back out of Binnington. And I think I've seen a little more of that this year than last year. So
now we can shrink this a little bit.
Let me just do the. I'm going to stay with the top 4 teams, and then we'll shrink it down for sure.
Okay. I was just going to say you can eliminate Arizona because they're not any of those categories. They're a trash heap. But go ahead.
Yeah, to me, the top 4 teams, are all in the same boat. Winnipeg's starting to eke their way back into this thing. But
I disagree. I would disagree. I would call Winnipeg a pretender. I don't believe.
I think they're a pretender too. But the Predators, okay, the Nashville Predators. If you watch one game, if you want to go back and watch a game, last night's Nashville Vegas game, that was a game. That was a game and a half, and it was really something because it was like it was interesting because the NHL during the day on the NHL.com was like, Predators prepared to make a statement game tonight against Vegas. And they did. They actually went out there and they did that, although they were outshot badly, and Vegas poured it on. But Saros was incredible. And it's just one of those situations.
I have contender mind bender for them because they have players with experience.
That's where I am.
They have players that are supposed to come through and are coming through, and they still could go cold scoring. And if they do, they're still going to have the same problem. But right now, they're not having that problem. So,
Kevin, I'm just puzzled by Nashville. It's basically the same team that they had last year. They re-signed Granlund. Granlund's got 24 assists going into last night's game. Duchesne and Johansson are actually playing well. One of their better defensemen is Alexander Carrier, who's making less than $1 million, like you mentioned before. And Saros, they haven't skipped a beat from Rene to Saros. I just don't know if it's for real. I don't know if I'm having some sort of dreams.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Mike, on that. I'm a mind bender as my primary one, and I don't even understand how they're doing what they're doing. Not only have they had an easy transition to Saros, but he's been better than Pekka was over the last thing. He's a guy that steals games, and the thing that's mind-bending is how Duchesne goes from literally a non-factor to a player that's involved again, and then Johansson was an okay kind of role player, and he's just a little better than that now, but suddenly he's making plays, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to this team, to Hines. I think this is a Copperfield type team this year. A little bit of magic that he's performed to get everybody on the same page. And give David Poile credit. He wanted to make this team harder to play against, and guys like Jeanette. And who's the other big guy?
Jakob Trenin.
Yes, those 2 guys have made a difference. Like Nashville is very difficult to play against. I'm sure you watched them last night.
Here's the thing about them. I was mind bending on them until last night when I finally got it. Because I've watched them in bunches of games. And last night I finally got it. I've got why they are what they are, and they are what they are based on the basic, simple premise of the Vegas Golden Knights when they were an expansion team. The Islanders Cup for 2 years, the Canadians last year in the playoffs, playing just incredibly fast hockey. Like the Predators play at a speed that is really insane. And Hines, that's what Hines has always been about. He's always about playing at that tempo. So you're dead on when you say Hines is a reason. It takes a lot of time and a lot of like huge amounts of working out and getting up to speed to be able to do this, to be able to pull this off. To play at that tempo that they play at, it's incredibly hard. But when you play against the team, and even the big guys they brought in, like you're talking about, they can all play at a fast tempo. They're all fast, and they're all
Duchene's really fast. Yeah.
And it's again, this is not about speed. It's not about individual speed. It's about playing at speed. It's about playing at tempo, and it's really about 3 passes from your zone to the other zone in less than 2.5 seconds. Like it's things like that you're talking about. They're just like crazy to keep up with them. Last night in Vegas, to see them do it against Vegas made it very apparent because this is how Vegas built their team. Now Vegas is no longer that team.
Yeah, no, Vegas is not the fast team anymore. They're the big team.
Right.
It's reminding me a bit
of like this can always be trouble.
Go ahead, Anthony.
They're reminding me a bit of the way they played under Peter Laviolette. Their style of play is reminding me a bit in terms of the speed, heavy forecheck, and they have the guys on the blue line, I think, as well, that can play that, and that's the key element for that team.
Yeah,
especially Carey, I think adds is that number 4 guy that helps everything I think to help click. In a way that allows a system like that to flourish.
He's actually the number 3 guy now.
Yeah,
He's the new Ryan Ellis.
Fabro got hurt. Fabro's still hurt.
Yeah, but he was ahead of Fabro anyway. Fabro's been okay this year. They've been appreciated the improvement he's made in his game.
Now, Minnesota Wild, I think, are a serious contender. But I'm afraid they're a pretender. I'm afraid they're a pretender like they've been in the past.
They're a contender with
such a hedge.
No. That's the way this game works, Anthony. Anthony, that's how this game works. Okay, this game is about that. This game's about what you're secretly afraid that the team could be.
They're a contender with an asterisk or caveat because
doesn't that make them a pretender?
If Bill Guerin,
I surrender. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if Bill Guerin. Bill Guerin before March the 21st goes out and gets a goaltender, then they're a serious contender, and I sure as hell wouldn't want to play them in the first round of the playoffs because they're a big, mean, talented, tough team. But if they go in with Kakkonen and Talbot, they might win a round, but they won't be good enough.
They did just sign a former Bruins goaltender too yesterday.
Zane
McIntyre. I mean, that's not bad because right now Talbot's just got a slight injury, but Talbot's been good. I'm not even worried about that. To me, they're a contender of the highest order. Like, I don't have any worries about them being a mind bender or anything. I think I'm all in for the Minnesota Wild. I think they're the team to beat still.
I'm in Russ's corner in this one. I may not be quite at that level like the team to beat, but I think they're as good as any number of teams in that Western Conference that could potentially be in the final.
Oh man, you guys have not watched over the last 2 decades the Minnesota Wild. When you say
but this is different.
Look at this season. We're not going to drop back into like previous seasons in the circumstance.
Westfalls isn't there anymore.
In this regard.
Yeah, it's mentioned the most important thing about this team is how many damn goals they score. Like we are scoring goals like crazy.
Ryan Hartman's going to get 25 goals this year.
Yeah,
that's what he used to. That's what he was supposed to do 5 years ago.
Yeah. They're I agree with that. They're a contender pretender just for exactly the same reasons. They have a history that says they won't be able to get it together. There's some flaws there. This is not a team. We used to believe, and maybe we don't believe this anymore, but that you had to lose before you could win. They haven't really done any losing in the playoffs. They haven't had that. Like the Islanders looked like they were ready because they got in and then they couldn't make the final step. And then we thought, okay, well, now they're ready. Well, turns out they aren't.
If that's the case, Toronto's bound to win the cup. And sometimes.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're absolutely.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's not losing in the first round. No. It's, you go and you play a couple rounds, you think you're great, and then you get wiped out. You go, what the hell happened?
Right. The second your players start to think that they can win it all,
right?
That it matters. And that's after winning 2 rounds usually, or even with some teams,
I mean, 1 round. Like the Tampa Bay Lightning are the best example.
Yeah.
They got in, they looked like they were great, and then they'd go so far, and then they'd lose, and they say, "What happened?" So, where Minnesota hasn't had that yet, they haven't had that long.
And like Toronto, you can sit there and say that this is a team that that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past, but it frigging matters what's happened in the past. It just does. I don't care if you throw all. I don't care if you throw all new players in.
They've got a top scorer in the league. The past doesn't
care.
matter. They got rid of Parisi. They got rid of Scooter. How does the past even matter for this team?
Russ, the mood in their building when they're in the playoffs, when they fall down 2-0 in game 1 of the playoffs, will tell you all you need to know about how much
the fans are not playing on the ice. I get it.
It doesn't matter. I've seen it. It is hard to get past that. There's a point at which they might just blow by it. But if they don't, if they struggle, if they're faced with their own mortality for some reason because they're struggling.
What is this, Macbeth? That moment. What are we talking about here?
No, that moment it'll matter. It'll matter what's happened. It'll matter to Toronto when they lose game 1 of the playoffs at home. It'll matter to that's when the past does mean something.
No, it matters when they lose game 7.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it does matter. I mean, your history does matter because as much as you want to say to the press, look, I wasn't here then when they lost all those games. I don't know anybody was on those teams, but it does because the pressure that's inherent within the community, weighs on you.
Every time you're asked that question, right? Every time you're asked that
question. You're asked 100 times. And so, there is an impact that it has on you. And some people it bothers more than others, but clearly it does. No doubt about it.
So and then Colorado, the big four we'll talk about here. This is a team that is a mind bender right now, but I think is a contender. I'm afraid is a contender. I would say because I really feel like this is a contending team. I really just can't get past. They've, like you said, Kevin, Minnesota Wild, they scored 116 goals, so far.
Colorado's got 123
in 31 games. Colorado's got 119 in 3 less games. Talk about scoring. Colorado just they score like crazy. This is a team that scores like crazy.
They're scoring like the Edmonton Oilers in the 80s.
Yes.
There's Cale Makar's goal last night. Like everybody in the league's talking about it. They're a very player. Nathan McKinnon. Doesn't have a lot of goals, but he's got a lot of points. They got a lot going for it.
So what they need is Charlie Huddy. No,
but they've had trouble defensively, and they really, COVID and injuries have, they've lost their cohesiveness a little bit. And I don't know whether I trust their goalie or not. Every time I watch, he has not looked like the same Kemper I saw in Arizona.
Well, okay, here I'm ringing the bell that Act always says that, and you too, Kev. With Kemper, it's staying healthy.
Yeah.
It's purely that. If he stays healthy, he's
I've seen him in goal, and I have been unimpressed. He doesn't seem the same confident goalie like he's been in the net, but he hasn't seemed like the same goalie.
He also hasn't had the expectation. I would also say he hasn't had the expectations on him, I think, on going to a contending team like Colorado. It does. You want to talk about in history in this case? I think it does matter in this circumstance where if you're going to a contending team and you've had success, in a market where it's not as expected as much and the expectations are much higher on you. But again, it's still, as Mike indicated, it is. I do believe injuries are as much an issue, and I think that sometimes robs you a little bit of your confidence that you might have had going when you were in Arizona.
If you were to put them in the Eastern Conference, Colorado, and you just went off a winning percentage, they would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th. They would be 9th in the conference in winning percentage. You know what they are in winning percentage in the West?
4th.
Number 1.
Because they only played 29 games. Okay.
They played 28 games. They're 679. They are the number 1 winning percentage in the Western Conference.
I was looking at points, not percentage.
Which is So it's just. It tells you the difference between the two conferences is so drastic. But
the Pacific is the worst division in hockey.
Yes.
Right, but Colorado is playing in the Central Division, so therefore, that's a tough division to play in. This is all those teams: Colorado. St. Louis, Minnesota, Nashville.
I know we're not going to talk about these teams, but I'll just say Dallas is a mind bender because they win like 11 in a row and then they can't score a goal and they can't. What did they go the first 16, 17 games of the regular season without a win in regulation?
Yeah, I'm going pretender on them.
Pretender?
Yep.
Yeah. Who else? I'm thinking I'm edging. I'm saying pretender, but I'm afraid they're in a surrender mode. Like I really think that they feel like Dallas should be in a surrender mode. And
I feel like
don't you have to think you're a contender to be a pretender? I mean, like I'm not sure.
Yeah, yes, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Like a pretender usually is a team that
pretender is a team that's doing well, right?
Right.
Yeah. I was bringing up earlier, Kevin.
I mean, I think the Blackhawks will soon be in surrender mode. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They Vancouver, I think, is a team that we're going to stay in this division. I apologize. We'll talk about that division again, but I mean, the one team that really does have to be looked upon in this division, and just briefly, and then we'll get out of here, is Winnipeg, because Winnipeg is between. There's 4 good teams, there's 3 bad teams, and then there's Winnipeg Jets, in my opinion. And what are the Jets? The Jets right now are they've got a .565 winning percentage. That's not terrible at all. That would get them in the playoffs in the East in many divisions, right? So they're looking, and they've won 2 in a row. They're a +4 goals differential. That's usually telling to a degree. What are the Jets? They're
like a box of Timbits. You don't know what you're going to get.
They're definitely a mind bender. There's no 2 ways about that, right? A mind bender with the potential of being a pretender. Is that possible? I mean, I'm just saying that that's because I really don't think they have it, but they have potential to squeak into the playoffs as the 5th if 5 teams make it out of this division, which a lot of people seem to think will. Right, so Winnipeg has a pretty good chance of making the playoffs.
I'm still stunned over hearing that Timbits come in a variety where you don't know what you're going to get. So, is that true?
We're still flabbergasted.
They have a lot of flavors for Timbits.
Justin Bieber Timbits, or
they actually have a Timbits cereal.
I mean, do you order? Well, my question is, do you order Timbits and not know what will be in your box? Is that true?
Oh, yeah, but you're gonna break it down. Like it was just a joke. Okay.
I actually thought that maybe that's how you order.
No.
The variety pack.
A half dozen of the Krullas.
No, you tell them what you're putting in.
Oh, okay, I get you. All right, I'm sorry. I thought you were totally being serious. I thought, wow, what a novel concept. Where you get, one of each. Like, what if you got one of each variety?
Yeah,
it's got a bad Timbit experience.
Yeah.
The Jets. Moving back for hockey just for a second. The Jets can't score goals. Like they can't score goals. This is the team that's 95 goals in 31 games. Like this is a team that is just completely, and yet they're a +4, which tells you that they're pretty good defensively.
Who's scoring a lot of goals? Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's who's scoring a lot of goals.
Yeah, I mean, and that this is a team that we always said defense was their problem. I think they've fixed that to a degree, but I think that they haven't necessarily, they haven't had enough offensively to be a threat in this division. I mean, this division is hard. There's no question about it. But and people, whoever finishes the second and third battle in this division in the playoffs is going to be awful. Like it's going to be 2 teams. There's just going to be, it could be Minnesota, Colorado for all we know. Like that, it could be that. Like it's just going to be crazy. In the first round, which really does, is always terrible to see.
Before we go,
yeah,
I just want to bring this up. Everybody can think about this. Maybe we can talk about it. We always talk about the importance of captains in hockey.
Yeah.
So the Red Wings lose to the Boston Bruins 5-2. Post-game Zoom interview. Captain Dylan Larkin comes to the podium, and someone asked him about the fact that the Bruins, play physical, and he said, and I quote, "I've noticed that our team is mediocre when teams play physical against us." Pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
Next game, last night, San Jose Sharks, Giovanni Smith, who listens to his captain apparently, comes out more engaged, more involved than he's been in a long time. He had been out of the lineup for an extended period of time, but even before, when he was in the lineup, really wasn't doing much, but he sure did last night. Jeff Blashill, the coach, moves Michael Rasmussen, a giant of a man, to the second line where he plays with what they refer to as one of the littles, Pius Suter. Yeah. And, he has one of his better games. And I thought, that's what being a captain is all about. Captain spoke. Not only did one of the players on the team listen, but the coach listened.
Conversely, Kev, there was a captain of the Philadelphia Flyers, because of the NHL blackout, couldn't watch his own team from his hotel room.
Yeah, that's good. That was
about that.
Yeah, that's why we need social media, though. I mean, seriously, like, wasn't that the fact that and those of us who have spent our lives in hotels understand exactly what that's about.
Yeah.
I was trying to send him my password, but it didn't get through.
Oh, you did try. Okay, thanks.
Captain,
I wanted to tell Kevin, it's like,
no, I
sure
think Kevin.
FaceTimed it.
There's something interesting about Kevin's thing beyond. I mean, obviously that's incredibly interesting. But I've been late getting on to this Toronto 30 by 30 thing. Like the whatever they did this show that not 30 by 30, but whatever it is.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I've watched one episode, and I want to watch more of them. But in that first episode, there's a moment right where Austin Matthews comes out to the press and says something about the way his team's playing. He's not the captain of the team, granted.
No,
but he comes out and says something. Right, he comes out and says, we're playing too safe. We're being too safe, I think is what he says, or something like that. And he gets.
It was after they lost to Edmonton. He was saying basically they were trying to play too conservative defensively. They weren't taking enough offensive chances. He was not particularly enthused with the way they played.
And the coach and GM just tear him apart for doing that in the media. In that documentary, they bring him in to talk to him privately about it. They talk to the team about the fact that he said this and he shouldn't have said it, and that bothered me. And I don't know.
Well, again, in a fishbowl like Toronto, you cannot have that stuff. You cannot have things that undercut, the rest of the team or the general manager or the coach. It will have a life of its own. That's why they want.
That's why you can't have nice things. Is that what you're saying, Mike? That's why you live in Toronto. That's why you can't have nice things, because that's something you want to have. Kevin just said that's something you want to have, right?
Where did they go at last year? What ended up happening?
Well, I'm just saying
the same result. The same result. Until
was that last season?
Yeah, it was last. It was that
documentary was last season.
Yeah, they had a great regular season, and they did what they did in the playoffs.
Yeah, but they shut Matthews down. They shut him up. They shut him up big time. They really shamed him. And I thought I'm like, what the heck? He is there. He's not your captain. Maybe he's not wearing a C on his shirt, but he did come out and say something that I thought was legitimate criticism, and they shut him up, and they showed him.
It's something like Mark Messier would have said.
Yeah, one person's legitimacy is another person's.
But they showed it, and they showed him shutting him up on TV, and then you draw the difference to the Larkin thing, like you said last night. The coach makes the moves and stuff like that. It's just, to me, it's an interesting, different way of handling this.
Well, yeah, I mean, what the takeaway from that is the Red Wings are trying to all be on the same page. The captain is talking to the coach, and trying to get everybody fired up.
And one team is in a rebuilding scenario, and they want, basically to be on, like you said, on the same page. Whereas Toronto last year, they thought that they had put together a team that would win the Stanley Cup, and they didn't want any kind of behind the scenes drama. That's what it was.
Yeah, and we don't really know the history either, or what it gets said behind closed doors.
But we kind of saw it on that show.
Yeah, no, that's right. So.
We saw a little bit of it, and
you normally wouldn't, and
you normally wouldn't, but it bothers me that you normally wouldn't. Like part of my the opinion I made on Dubas, Kyle Dubas at that point was made in that moment when I saw that. I really did bother me. Like, it really did make me think, like, does this guy know what he's doing? I honestly, it did occur to me that you should be not shutting up your guys. Like, you didn't win. You're not in a situation where.
But that happened in January. We're not, that was not something that happened at the end of the season.
Right.
That was something that happened in
I think last night was January, Mike.
No, but I'm talking about last year. January was the opening month of the season.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
All right, that's true. All right.
Anyway,
thanks, guys. Remember, without the buzz, folks, it is just hockey. It's 420. Sorry it went so long. We will talk to you all again tomorrow.